Thank you. Public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matter that's not specifically included on the agenda as an action item, and any item that is included on the agenda as an action item. We will take your testimony now instead of when we meet and discuss the particular item. Is there anyone that wishes to make a statement at this time?
Yes.
Could you?
My name is, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Could you please identify yourself?
Yes. I am Marla Burdette. I live at 814 Marsh Road. This is pertaining to a special use permit at 676 K Court for a garage.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I did send a letter that I wanted to in person restate my position. I'm the backyard neighbor in reference to the proposed garage. I'm sorry that my feelings about this situation may cause hard feelings with my neighbor, but the proposed garage will affect my life. We have a shallow backyard of about 25 feet. This will put the proposed large garage about 45 feet from my house. Our everyday living is located in the back of our house, so the garage will be close to our kitchen and living room. The garage will create the feeling of a wall that will also eliminate my sky view. I could live by Walmart if I wanted to look at a wall. Also, it's been brought to my attention that a smaller portion of my back has another neighbor, and they have a building that is 23 feet tall that doesn't block my view, and it's huge. I wonder if the owners could store their recreational equipment off-site and even ultimately save some money. I believe the garage could also affect the future resale aesthetics of my house, so I'm against the construction of this garage.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. When we get to that item, we will discuss your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Are there any other comments?
I see no further comment.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time for possible action is the approval of the minutes of May 27th, 2020. And I believe everybody has those draft minutes in their packet. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If there are none, could I have a motion for approval, please? All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Tingle. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Commissioner Perry. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Modification of the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and the public body may remove any item from the agenda or delay discussion related to an item on the agenda at any time. Is there any modifications to the agenda at this time?
No, sir.
All right. Item E1, LU 2020-0012, discussion and possible action regarding a request for an administrative review of a metal storage container on property zoned retail commercial located at 2590 South Carson Street, APN 009-051-10. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This container has been the site of the Toyota dealer since 2010. Development Standards 1.10.9 allow for a storage container to be permanently located on a site subject to a special use permit and subject to review every 5 years for verification of compliance. The container is maintained in good condition. We have not received any complaints about it. The special use permit findings can still be met. I am recommending a modification to Condition 8 that further review required by the Development Standards can be done or may be done administratively as opposed to coming before this commission, although the Community Development Director would still have the ability to refer it to the commission should he choose to. I'm happy to go more in depth on this. Cliff Sorensen from Campagna Auto Group is on the phone, I believe, and can speak to it as well. And I'm happy to answer questions or, as I said, go more in depth if that's what the commission would like.
Any questions for staff? The only, and you answered in item number 8, this seems to me like it, and it's titled as an administrative action, which would seem like it would be something you could do without us.
Exactly, and the only reason it's before you is because 5 years ago when it was approved, it was very specific that this item would come back before the Planning Commission at its meeting in June 2020. So I was obligated to bring it forward, but going forward, I would suggest that we just handle it administratively unless the director finds otherwise.
Okay. You said the applicant's on the line?
I believe so. Mr. Sorensen?
Yes, I am.
All right, sir, have you read the conditions of approval of this, and do you agree or not disagree with them at all?
I am in agreement, and yes, I have read them.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, sir, just appreciate your guys' time.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? All right, hearing none.
For the benefit of the record, the speaker was Cliff Sorensen.
I'm sorry, thank you. Is there a motion? All right,
Okay. I move to approve LU 2020-0012 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
and that's Commissioner Preston with her mask on.
Yes.
Is there a second? A second by Commissioner Wiggins. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Thank you. Opposed, no? Motion carries. Item E2, LU 2020-0015 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit to have the cumulative total of accessory buildings exceed 50% of the size of the primary building, and for the cumulative total of the accessory structure to exceed 5% of the lot size on property zone single-family 21,000 PUD located at 676K Court, APN 101-575-17. Hope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is seeking to build an 1,836 square foot garage structure that will have a height of 23 feet. I will mention the allowable height is 26 feet. The subject property is 0.55 acres. I want to talk about some procedural stuff first, just for the benefit of the record. Procedurally, this is before you because the accessory building will result in a cumulative total of the accessory structures exceeding 5% of the lot size. Therefore, a special use permit is required. With this building, the cumulative square footage of the accessory buildings would be 62% of the size of the primary structure. That would require what's called an administrative permit, which is handled by the administrative hearings officer. The findings for an administrative permit are the exact same findings as the findings for a special use permit. And so we are putting both of these items before the commission, and there will not be an administrative hearing. Both the 5%, exceeding 5% of the lot size and exceeding 50% of the size of the primary structure is before the commission today. Now to the substance. I have on the screen for you the location of the property it's on K Court, which is off Hidden Meadow Drive. The subject property has a home with an attached garage for a total square footage of 3,215 square feet. There's currently a 144 square foot gazebo on the property. The proposed 1,836 square foot garage is proposed to be located in the southeast corner of the property. The building is proposed to utilize lap siding on the walls and composition shingle on the roof. I think that's interesting because we're not looking at a metal building here. This will be something that's using materials that we often see on residential structures as opposed to a lot of the shop buildings, which are the metal buildings that we see throughout the town. The proposed structure will meet all required setbacks, including the 10-foot side setback and the 20-foot rear setback. The applicant has advised that the purpose of the building is to store an RV, a boat, truck, and various lawn equipment. There is no plumbing in this building. As the commission knows, when you consider a special use permit, you need to consider the 7 required findings of fact. In the staff report, we did make those findings in the affirmative. We did receive Ms. Burdett's letter just as the packet was going out, and it was included in your packet. I did want to speak to that, and I've included this slide in the PowerPoint. When I scaled Ms. Burdett's property to the property line, I scaled it at 25 feet. So I believe she has a depth of 25 feet, and that's what she just told you on the telephone. The applicant's proposed building would be 20 feet from the property line, which is the required setback for a rear setback. Had the applicant chose to build an attached structure, this would not be before you, yet the massing and the position and location of that structure could be exactly as proposed. In fact, rather than the 23 feet, it could be up to 26 feet tall, and it's required to be 10 feet from the side property line and 20 feet from the rear property line. I am still recognizing I didn't have Ms. Burdett's comments when the staff report went out. I'm still supportive of this application. It is complying with the setbacks. It's within the lawful building envelope. It's using materials that are typical of a residential area as opposed to the more agricultural metal materials. And it's within the height limit for the zoning district. So I can still make the 7 required findings. I believe Jeffrey and Margaret Osborne, the applicants, are on the telephone, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Wiggins?
Commissioner Wiggins, for the record, this is an odd-shaped lot. How do you determine side and rear setbacks?
The rear is parallel to the front, and so in this case, you can see parallel to the front's obvious, right? And then you have 2 sides radiating out from the front. And I believe those other 2 I would call rear, although I don't have to worry so much about the one that's on the west side because there's a 30-foot common open space easement there where nothing can be built. So they already have something even more than the 20 feet because it's next to the, blanking on the name of that trail. Thank you, the Mexican Ditch Trail. So yes, so that's a 30-foot setback over there. And you saw I have the comment about the gazebo, which has been placed in that 30-foot area. And per the PUD standards, you're not allowed to have any structures in that 30-foot area. Thank you.
Hope, while it's really none of our business, is there an HOA with this PUD?
I'll have the Osborne speak to that. I did not look into that. What I did look into is the terms of the PUD. And so what this isn't a PUD. There were certain standards in the PUD, including the 30-foot easement that we just talked about, including a height limitation of 26 feet and some other things. So I did verify that. I did have a conversation with a neighbor earlier today, Mr. Jackson. He alluded to some CC&Rs that are no longer, I believe they're not dormant, they've been reneged. Terry would know what the word is he said the developer
Abandoned
had, I'm sorry, what's the word?
Abandoned?
There could be that, but evidently there were CC&Rs that prohibited outbuildings, but those CC&Rs no longer exist. But the owner can probably speak more specifically to an HOA.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff? You said the applicant is on the line?
Yes, I believe
Yes, we
Mr. and
are.
Mrs. Osborne.
Yes, we are here. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Have you read the report from staff with the recommendations and will you accept those?
Yes, we will.
Yes, we will.
Okay. And could you shed some light on my question about an HOA and My original question is really whether or not there's an architectural control commission or committee out there
Right.
that needs to pass on these plans also.
To the best of our knowledge, there is not. We did, when this subdivision, or when this division was first built, there were CC&Rs. However, those have been abandoned when the when the builder completed building and selling off parcels of property. So that's been abandoned. There are no CC&Rs. However, we're trying to make this garage look just like our home and not metal. We will have the composite shingles and siding to match our home.
Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay,
Yes,
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Perry?
yes, I do have one question. Why did you choose to build a separate building that's detached from your house up against the back of your yard instead of just doing it as an attachment to your house, which would have not required any type of special use permit?
Well, how our yard is situated right now, it just didn't make sense for the spacing of our house. The back part of our house is our sleeping rooms. So to add a garage to that and keep within the sightline or the easement requirements, we would have had to redesign two of our bedrooms and make a hallway, and it would have been cost prohibitive at that time, at that moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. We bring it back to the commission. Are there any questions or comments? Nope. Is there a motion? Oh, come on, guys. All right, Commissioner Wiggins.
I move to approve special use permit LU-2020-0015 based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
2 nays.
No, I think I'm the only nay.
No, I am.
Oh, Evan.
He eyed his nay, so there are,
Yes, nay. Okay, based on findings 2 and 7 of the proposal, and I can't vote.
okay, Commissioner Perry and Commissioner Tingle voted no. Motion carries, correct? Item E3. Item E3, discussion and possible action regarding a request for a special use permit for RV and boat storage on property zoned general commercial, general industrial, and single-family 21,000 square foot located at 4619, 4639, and 4719 Highway 50 East and 2477 Empire Ranch Road. APN 008-283-01, 008-283-02, 008-294-01, and 008-371-01. Heather.
Thank you. Heather Ferris, Associate Planner for the record. The applicant is proposing an RV and boat storage facility on the 7.36 acre project site. A lot line deletion was recently recorded, merging the 4 parcels into one, with the new APN being 008-283-04. The parcel has split zoning of general commercial, general industrial, and single-family 21,000. Indoor storage of boats and RVs is considered a warehouse use and is allowed in both the general commercial and general industrial zoning districts. And outdoor storage is considered an allowed accessory use subject to meeting the requirements of Division 1.12 of the development standards. The uses are not allowed in the single-family 21,000 zoning district. When there is split zoning, in order to utilize a parcel for a use that is only allowed in one of the zoning districts, The municipal code allows for the use subject to first obtaining a special use permit or a zoning map amendment. Therefore, the special use permit is before you this evening. The facility would include a 900 square foot office building, 98 enclosed storage spaces along the northwest and south of the project site, 77 covered storage spaces at the interior of the site, 36 uncovered spaces along the eastern portion, and a dump station, potable water station, and propane filling station. Hours of operation will be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. with office hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily, and the site would be secured with fencing and electronic gates, and customers would have a gate code to access. The Planning Commission is authorized to approve a special use permit upon making the 7 required findings in the affirmative. Staff has made all 7 findings and is recommending approval. I would note finding 2 has to do with compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. The property is surrounded by similar uses to the east and west and commercial uses to the north across Highway 50. There are single-family residences located to the south across Carter Avenue. The applicant has incorporated larger setbacks, fencing, and landscaping along the southern boundary, in particular, in order to ensure compatibility with residentially zoned properties. Additionally, staff has included recommended conditions of approval limiting the hours of operation, which we just discussed, and requiring lighting plan to be submitted to further mitigate any potential impacts to the residential area. We did receive 1 public comment objecting to the project. The main concern cited in the comment email is the number of RV storage locations in the area that are underutilized and neglected, and the continued development of vacant land. With that, I'm available for questions, and I believe the applicant's representative, Karen Downs with Manhart Consulting, is available by phone.
Any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Tinkle?
So I'm assuming there was a traffic study done. I see that there was, and it said it was 190 daily trips, which, okay, yeah, I get that, because people aren't in and out of those types of locations that frequently, but that corridor has a lot of traffic on it, and there is not a traffic control device for that section of road until you get to Fairview and 50, or Deer Run Road and 50. So getting in and out of that facility, if you are, pulling a fifth wheel, trailer, boat, what have you, could be interesting given the volume of traffic on that section of road. So I'm just thinking that maybe the 190 daily trips criteria isn't exactly what should be looked at, given the volume of traffic on that stretch of road. And I saw it, because I went to the dump yesterday morning, and there was a ton of traffic. If I had been trying to pull out of that section, it would have been crazy bad, because the traffic was just nuts at that time of morning. So just a comment. Because
Would you care to speak to that, please?
Yeah. Stephen Potet, Development Engineering for the record. So when we're looking at this project, we did speak with the Transportation Department as to whether or not they thought a traffic impact study looking at the level of service at that intersection was warranted, and or any warrants for other traffic control, and they did not think that one was warranted there, just based on their knowledge of the area. So, and based on knowledge of the volumes that are required to trigger those.
Well, what Commissioner Tingle says is true. A right turn is easy, left turn is hard. And there's a turn lane, so coming off of Highway 50 shouldn't be a problem. I guess it's just, if I was coming back to town and I made a right turn where's the next place I can turn around? I have to go all the way down to Deer Run, I guess.
There's no entrance.
Are there any other questions for staff?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I have a question.
go ahead, sir.
Why not just rezone, get the residential property out of there? That way, this whole issue becomes moot.
It would also require a master plan amendment. The code allows for a special use permit to be applied for, and that's the route that the applicant chose to take.
Mr. Eswine, did you get that?
I did get it, and I have a problem generally with split zone property. It seems to me that whenever you zone, you should zone according to property lines, and this is a perfect example of why that should be. But I understand Heather's comment, and I guess I can go along with it.
Well, but then what happens in reality is at the end of the year, when we look at the master plan and recommend changes, this would be one of the things we would recommend to change then. If the special use permit is approved and the facility is built, then we would kind of retrofit the whole thing to go back and amend the master plan and the zoning map. Is that not true?
It's certainly something that could be considered, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I could ask a question, Commissioner Perry.
Mr. Perry, go ahead.
Thank you. Why would you have to amend the master plan? It was always my understanding the master plan is a guideline, but it's not necessarily required that the zoning be the same as the master plan.
The zoning is supposed to be consistent with the master plan. There's that first finding in just about every type of application you guys review, which is master plan consistency.
Okay. My other question is with regards to the street and the traffic, following up on the earlier discussion. Is there any modification to Empire Ranch Road widening or anything that is included as a result of this development?
Stephen Pote again, Development Engineering. There are frontage improvements required on that portion of the frontage, and then also there's a road on the back side where there's improvements, and then also on Highway 50 there's a multi-use path that they'll be required to install.
So frontage improvements along Empire Ranch Road,
Correct.
which would be what? Gutters, sidewalks? It is. I just need to get closer to it.
Curb, gutter, sidewalk, and then the pavement width to finish the standard street section.
Okay. So it is going to get widened a bit. Okay, thank you.
The other exit out of the property that goes back to Highway 50, is that open at all times, only open for fire, or what is the purpose of the other exit?
It's emergency access.
Emergency access only?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any further questions for staff? Is the applicant on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you?
Yes, please identify yourself and go ahead.
Hi, this is Karen Downs with Manhart Consulting.
Hi, Karen. Are you familiar with the conditions of approval?
Yes, I am.
Could you answer our question about why you just didn't go for the zoning change?
So we met with staff at a major project review meeting earlier, and this was a route suggested, and just that we meet all the findings for the special use permit as presented. So this was the route that we took.
Okay. Do you have any other comments for us at this time?
I don't have anything to add. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? No? All right, thank you. All right,
Thank you.
let's bring it back in. Mr. Perry, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I was just going to comment because yesterday I walked out the site there and I was happy to see that in the plan they were going to hold on to the old elm trees that were there. I don't know what was there before historically, but that's good. And I mean, it looks to me like it's consistent with the development that's happened on either side there. So that's just my only comment. I didn't have anything other
Okay.
than that.
Are there any other comments from anyone on the staff? Is there a motion from the staff, from the commission?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve LU 2020-016 based on findings and subject to conditions of approval contained in the staff report.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by the masked lady. Commissioner Brett, with her batting eyes.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. E4. For discussion only, presentation and discussion only regarding the drafting of regulations for the cultivation of hemp. Mr. Plummer, I've seen you're doing this one.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, Lee Plemmel, Community Development Director. This item's on your agenda for discussion only, no action tonight. As you know, there was a moratorium put on the cultivation of hemp so that we can develop regulations. And one of the things that was identified during that process by the Planning Commission is the desire for more information regarding hemp. And let me get to our presentation here. It's not this one. Probably this one. Okay, so to that end, to provide information to you regarding hemp, we've brought the city's open space manager, Lindsay Boyer's here with us. She's given this presentation or very similar to it to the Board of Supervisors through the process, has been out in the field looking at it, and I'm sure she'll go through it. And I think we just want to start with that, answer questions, and then we can get into, as your staff report has, is some of the possible regulations, talking about where hemp's permitted now, where marijuana's permitted, and which direction we want to go to come back with some regulations. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over to Lindsay. I just wait.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, Lindsay Boyer, Open Space Manager for Carson City Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. And as Lee said, I'm just going to share some information with you all about hemp production and a little bit how it relates to marijuana as well. So for some background information, industrial hemp is considered the plant Cannabis sativa. This is actually the same species as marijuana. The only difference is in the concentration of THC. THC being the psychoactive component that makes marijuana a recreational substance rather than what industrial hemp is typically used for. So in order to be considered hemp, the plant material is actually tested in a laboratory, and it has to come back at less than 0.3% THC in order to be considered industrial hemp. If it registers above that, then it's automatically considered marijuana. So industrial hemp can be processed into a variety of products, everything from fiber to using the seed for seed oil. It's used for paper, textiles, clothing, and much more. Right now, with kind of the boom that we're seeing in hemp production, it's primarily going towards CBD oil production, and that is made by utilizing the flower material of the plant specifically. So for growing this plant in an outdoor setting, the grow season is approximately April 1st to October 31st. And there's a minimum of 65 days of growth from seedling to harvest. So just some photos for comparison here. You can see that the hemp plant on the left and the marijuana plant on the right look extremely similar to one another. Again, these pictures of the hemp plants were taken from a crop that was being used for CBD oil production specifically. And again, because the flowers are utilized for that and the flowers are utilized in marijuana cultivation, that's why they look pretty similar. If the plants were being grown for fiber or other materials, it would look quite a bit different. So just another comparison for you. And again, there's no way to really distinguish between these two plants in the field. The only way to determine what the plant is has to be through a laboratory test. So some additional background on just hemp in general and the regulations. So in 2014, essentially industrial hemp was only allowed to be grown in research projects, so a lot with the university. There was a lot of commercial restrictions. But with the passing of the 2018 federal farm bill, this legalized industrial hemp production and lifted those commercial restrictions. So that's where we really started to see the hemp production take off. So the Nevada Department of Agriculture is the state agency that's responsible for regulating and managing industrial hemp production. They do everything from issuing the permit to doing the inspections. They collect the material to be sent to the lab, and they would be the ones following up with any enforcement as well. So in 2019, this was the first year the NDA really started to accept applications on a regular sort of basis, and they've just been seeing exponential increases in the amount of interest in applications that they're receiving. So going a little bit more into the roles and responsibilities of the Nevada Department of Agriculture, I mentioned that they review and issue permits, so that's where the process starts. Anyone who's interested in growing industrial hemp would submit a application to the Division of Agriculture, where they would have to indicate that they have local jurisdictional approval. They also have to indicate whether or not they have the proper water permits as well, because that's a big component. You have to have water rights essentially, or be using municipal water sources. And that application fee is $500 per application with some additional costs there per acre. So it's not cheap for people to apply for this. So once someone has applied for a permit and has been signed off by Department of Ag, they're then responsible for the inspections and testing. So they're going out to the site and they're taking physical samples of both flower and stem and leaf material of the plant, and they're taking it back to be processed within their laboratories. They get that test back, and then at that point, they need to interface with the landowner and let them know whether or not they passed the test. And again, if the test comes back and says that that plant material exceeded 0.3% THC, then the Nevada Department of Agriculture has to work with that landowner for a remediation plan, because that product has to be destroyed because it's essentially considered illegally grown marijuana at that point. So it can be burned, mulched, tilled under. At this point, feeding it to animals is not approved, but the NDA staff have to be on site watching this process take place to ensure that it's been completed. So transitioning a little bit away from the rules and regulations with the state and more just into how this plant grows. Industrial hemp can be grown both in indoor and outdoor settings. This photo here is taken of an outdoor facility. It's been grown in a hoop house, so it is contained, but it's also outdoor. Generally, with any crop, it's best grown on soil that has good high nutrient content and a lot of organic matter. It can be grown on poorer soils, but then you're looking at the use of fertilizers and things like that, which I'll get into a little bit later. And it can also just result in your crop not establishing at all. So here's just another picture for you guys to see what those sort of indoor facilities look like, but this is just a fairly primitive hoop house. It's still an open air facility. They've got some fans and things there, but not too much to really contain odor and things like that. This is another example of a full-on outdoor industrial hemp facility. So you can see it's not contained at all. It's not within any sort of building. It's just being grown in rows in the soil. And you can see here, and I'll show you some additional photos, that the plants can vary in size as well. And I'd also like to point out all of the weeds that you see growing within those rows. That will become important a little bit later. So just some additional photos really illustrating the range of size. I mean, some of these plants were very small, and then you can see the photo on the right there. Some of them are nearly as big as a person, and this was mid-growing season, so these plants will still grow larger after what you're seeing here. So a little bit going into some environmental concerns. So I mentioned weeds specifically, so noxious and nuisance weeds. You can see in the photo here, there's just an abundance of weeds that have taken over this outdoor grow facility. So with industrial hemp, because of the way that it's used to produce the CBD oil specifically, but with any of the other products that you produce, no pesticides can be used on the crops unless they're organic or natural, which is great, but organic and natural products tend to not be very efficient or successful when it comes to dealing with weed populations, whether it's noxious or nuisance, invasive plants in general. Don't do well with these organic products, and so you tend to turn into a situation like this where there's a lot of competition from weeds, and it can get to be unsightly, and especially if there's some noxious weeds on the property, which you're required by law to remove and manage those populations. An organic product would just not really be suitable to treat those. Odor and smell comes up a lot when it comes to discussing industrial hemp and marijuana. Again, because it's the same plant, it has more or less the exact same odor, especially when it's being grown for flower production, which tends to be the most odorous portion of the plant. Erosion can also be a concern. So, if you're clearing a swath of land, you're going to have issues with runoff, you're going to have issues with dust and things like that, unless you have a cover crop or something in there to try to keep the dust down. So that's always a consideration. And then I mentioned fertilizers at an earlier point. So kind of same with the noxious and nuisance weeds. You can't use pesticides and herbicides. You also can't use a lot of traditional fertilizers. They lead to issues with runoff and can contaminate the soil if overused. And so it's another situation where they're promoting the use of mainly organic fertilizers. So this can just lead to, if not done correctly, too much fertilizers being introduced into the system. Some additional environmental concerns, of course, floodplain protection. So in certain areas, if industrial hemp was being proposed to grow, going back to having to clear large swaths of land, that can really lead to runoff issues along water bodies and can lead to flooding issues as well. So that's always a consideration with any crop, really. Water always comes up with hemp. There's a lot of misgivings, I think, when it comes to growing this plant. A lot of people say it's extremely water efficient. Some people say it's actually not very water efficient. From the research that's been conducted, it requires approximately 20 to 30 inches of precipitation each year, which is comparable to growing a traditional crop like corn. So it's not necessarily as water efficient as folks may hope for. And then wildlife, dogs and livestock are always a concern. They're going to be attracted to this plant, especially deer and grazing animals. And that can be a problem both for the person growing the crop as well as the wildlife. Going into some residential concerns, so aesthetics being one of them. I mean, you've seen some photos here today of what those crops look like. A lot of them are on a fairly large scale. Because it's indistinguishable from marijuana, there could be some confusion. Neighbors and public perception always comes into this discussion as well, of folks maybe not knowing whether it's hemp or marijuana, and that potentially leading to theft or trespass or issues like that from folks who are, hoping to maybe sell it illegally, thinking that it is marijuana. So that's always a concern. And this leads into issues with law enforcement as well, which this has already been seen across the country, related to transportation concerns specifically. So if you're transporting your industrial hemp that you've grown legally and you have a permit and you get pulled over by law enforcement, the law enforcement has no way to determine if that's legal or illegal unless you have the proper documentation and proof of testing and things like that. Cross-contamination is also a concern. So industrial hemp and marijuana are both pollinated through the wind. So it's really easy for, say, an industrial hemp population to be grown maybe near marijuana, not in Carson City, obviously, but in other municipalities. And that can lead the industrial hemp to actually turn into marijuana or head in a different direction. So that can be a problem as well, and goes back to the need to potentially have that be contained to prevent that cross-contamination. And zoning, I mean, up until this point, per the state, folks can grow as much hemp as they want as long as they're within the proper zoning. And I just included this to reinforce the point. This is from somewhere in the Midwest, I believe, but this was just a news article that I had seen where, it just illustrates that confusion that law enforcement are having on the marijuana versus industrial hemp. So with that, I would love to take any questions.
Questions? Terry?
First of all, I know this is coming to us because of the space that is out there in the open space part of the Silver Saddle. It's not even the Silver Saddle acquisition. Silver Saddle acquisition was federal. This was another one where we worked with the different landowners because I sat on open space during that time. And I think that a lot of us in Carson City and sitting on the open space and having this coming up now are kind of surprised because we do know we have agricultural designated areas. However, they've been primarily used for things like hay and timothy and running cattle and running sheep. We have not really had a lot of crops coming up in this area. And I know that when we, were sitting there on open space, we never thought that this would actually be a crop. It's not a crop really area. They did reserve the water rights. And so I can see where they went on this. Lyon County has a thing that is one of their statutes that says that you have the right to farm. Anytime I sell anything in Lyon County, I have to go ahead and do a disclosure that says people can farm. I don't see a lot of farming in Mound House. I don't see a lot of farming in a lot of different areas of Lyon County because it's just not conducive to it. However, Yerington does have the right to farm. So then that way you have things like water, dust, fertilizers, pesticides, all of these things that you're concerned about. So, and I'm getting more experience with hemp. And my concern with hemp is it stinks. It smells so bad. And that's one of the problems that we have with marijuana too, is that it smells so bad. And if in an open air type situation, it drifts and it stinks. And we've already had problems with smells. I just don't even want to go there. The other concern I have about is when they go ahead and harvest it, that a lot of times when they harvest, they leave just a great big thing of dust and dirt. And with our agricultural conditions, we haven't really put anything like we do with builders that say that they have to have a water truck and continue to keep it wet. And so the wind blows. So that's a big problem. The other thing is drying. I had a big hemp farmer contact me out of Douglas County because he had all this wonderful hemp crop year, really excited because the state agriculture has said that it's the largest growing agricultural crop in the state of Nevada. This is exciting. So Terry, you should help me find a place to go ahead and dry it. Are you kidding me? Again, it's like marijuana. Where are you going to dry this? So I'm looking at this going, you know, I understand it's a good crop. I understand that it has this place. I understand it has a thing with CBD oil. But Carson City, Nevada is really not a crop growing thing. And we don't have, you know, fields of strawberries, blueberries, corn, you know, watermelons, this type of thing ever. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. I think it's going to be a problem.
Other comments?
Just from a historical reference, my family is from Iowa. And in 1997, we went back to clean out my grandmother's house because she had passed. And our cousin lives on a dairy farm in Osage, Iowa, and the hemp grows on the ditch banks. And nobody has a problem with it. Nobody bothers anybody about it. It's just there. So it's kind of like one of those things where, and I never thought I'd say this because I was so anti-drug, anti-marijuana, anti-whatever when I was growing up, that I don't have a problem with this. And if people can live east of the water treatment plant, which this area is going to be directly in the path of that wonderful wafting afternoon breeze that brings the aroma from the water treatment plant, I think the least of their worries is going to be a hemp grow in their neighborhood. Because when you walk that area in the afternoon where the Korean War Memorial is and you get that afternoon smell of the water treatment plant, I would much prefer the smell of a hemp grow than I do the smell of the water treatment plant, but that's just a personal observation. But I frankly don't have a problem with this because I think hemp is probably a passive material that will save a lot of trees and, if we have to divert water to grow hemp instead of something else, I have no problem with that. But I think that it is a better option to pursue than some of the things we're doing to wreck the planet, and that's just a personal observation of mine again.
Anyone else? Mr. Perry?
Yes, Commissioner Perry, I just had a few questions. I was looking at the maps in the back of these, Lee, and trying to kind of get a feel for those. I wish I'd have pulled out the master plan map. But it says locations of agricultural zoning districts in which hemp could be grown by right under current zoning regulations. So those areas are zoned agricultural, right? Right.
Yes.
And then it says locations of industrial zoning districts in which hemp could be grown. So you can grow agricultural products in industrial zoning?
So as I pointed out in the staff report, and now I'll put those same maps you're referring to up on the presentation there. First of all, we have agricultural zoning districts where this would be allowed to be grown outside at this time as we have a moratorium now, but as an agricultural product, hemp would otherwise be able to be grown here as an agricultural product. So, for example, some of these properties are where the Empire Ranch Golf Course is now. Lampa Ranch, portions of the Lampa Ranch are still zoned ag, and then the Buzzy's Anderson Ranch out by Carson River Road has properties that are zoned agriculture. And I include those because those areas are relatively large and in relative close proximity to residential areas. Agriculture is also permitted in Conservation Reserve, which is a zoning district for private properties that tend to be on the areas surrounding us and in the hills, which there's some here and there. probably not as conducive to agriculture, although it could, if they could get the water there, they could put up a greenhouse. It could do it, but I would say these would be the more impactful areas or the more potential for a land use conflict in these areas that are agriculture. And so in terms of the industrial area, so we allow, like if somebody came in with a hydroponic processing facility for any type of agricultural product as part of a processing facility indoors, that would be allowed now in industrial. And again, hemp would be like any other herb or oil or anything else that's processed. It would have to be indoors in these areas because we don't allow the outdoor use, but it could be grown in these areas.
So hemp, what we're talking about here, it would be required to be grown indoors?
No, I'm saying if somebody wanted to do it in the industrial area as part of a full cycle processing,
Okay.
like they do with marijuana,
Then they'd have
it would have to be indoors in industrial areas. It could be outdoors in the agriculture and conservation reserve districts. And so thank you. I'm going to take the opportunity on that question, just finish off the slides here. And that's as compared to where is marijuana cultivation currently permitted? It's within not just industrial areas, but a smaller portion of them, just the general industrial areas, which tend to be distanced by some buffer between residential areas. So again, kind of comparing this slide in lower right there, those are kind of all the industrial areas. Marijuana is confined to that particular geographic location northeast in the city, and also to more specific industrial zoning districts. And I'm going to continue this. This is my last slide, and I'll leave this up. So, because this is the table that's in your staff report, and it compares generally the current hemp regulations, if it were an agricultural product versus the growing of marijuana in terms of where it's allowed in the permitted zoning districts, what the process is. Again, agricultural processes are by right, where they're permitted by zoning versus conditional use for marijuana. The marijuana we don't have the odor regulations in our code, but there are state regulations so that when they get the special use permit, those odor conditions of not being detected outside of the building off the premises gets incorporated into that. But again, as it is now, there's no odor requirement for cultivation of hemp. And as we were talking about, it could be either indoor or outdoor, but depending on where it is with hemp, whereas it's strictly indoor and confined, and odors are contained for marijuana. Same thing for visibility. Marijuana can't be visible, whereas hemp could, and marijuana has limited signage. Hemp would not, although they're not advertising growing of hemp. That's probably not an issue, but we do have sign regulations that limit the size of marijuana. They don't want to advertise that they have marijuana cultivation, and they probably wouldn't want to advertise that they have hemp cultivation either. But there are, just to point out that there are special regulations for marijuana for signage. So, thank you.
I think, to me, I have to agree with Commissioner Preston that of the, 7 agricultural areas, they are all either abutting or very close to residential areas as they sit now. I just think we're opening up a Pandora's box for odors and a lot of other problems with those neighbors if we do that. I don't have nearly as much of a problem with allowing them the same kind of restrictions to grow indoors in industrial areas or grow indoors anywhere. But I think, and in the conservation reserve areas, I don't think that's really our purview. But I think in these tiny little pieces of zoning that we have ag in, I just don't think it fits with Carson City. I would be very concerned in the future that we didn't get a ton of backlash over that and just make it worse than it is. So from, as I look at your chart, the only thing I would do different from marijuana for hemp would be to include conservation reserve and make it look like the hemp or make it look like the marijuana regulation. My 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. And you brought up something just, I wanted to mention. Lindsay went over a lot of the issues, some of which you have control over, which is zoning. So you reminded me to kind of focus on the land use aspect of it. Is it an appropriate land use in the vicinity of what's around these various zoning districts? So, when it gets to law enforcement and does it look like this or that, it's not necessarily your purview, but something you should note about it. But it's looking at where it's allowed. So if the options are to do nothing and just allow it to be grown wherever agricultural products are to be grown, and if that's the recommendation, that's what we'll take forward. But you do need to look at it, considering those impacts that Lindsay pointed out in terms of what it may do, the impacts to the downstream users, et cetera, dust. Those are the types of things you should be considering, I believe, in making this decision. And that's not, I understand that there are many agricultural crops that have similar impacts, as was pointed out, so.
I don't have a problem with
Yeah.
hemp growing. I just have a problem with it in the areas that we're going to have to allow it to be grown. And Commissioner Preston?
I have another question too, is in regards to the fertilization, because the fact is most every one of these areas that are in there are wetlands that are part of the zone that goes back into the Carson River and back into our aquifers. So what kind of fertilization is required for this particular crop?
Good question. So like any crop, it needs a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, those kinds of things. So those are all things that unless you have good soil, you're generally going to have to add those in through some sort of chemical form. And, right now, taking, for example, the Buzzy's Ranch example into perspective, right now that's primarily just grazing. They used to do some alfalfa production in the past, but that's not really actively being done. With any of these particular parcels, I can't think of an example where they're really introducing a whole lot of fertilizer into the system because they're just not growing traditional crops. So there would be that increase of those chemicals like nitrogen specifically that would need to be added in order to have a successful grow.
And I'd also note that our remaining agriculturally zoned properties in Carson City are almost exclusively in the flood zone.
Commissioner Eswan, I've been neglecting you, sir. Do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I've been a farmer and a sheep rancher for a while, or in my past, and those odors to me are much more offensive than marijuana. And this isn't even marijuana. This is hemp. And I don't think that we should be concerned with odor in agricultural areas. I would just like to suggest, my comment is that we should allow it as a use by right within the agricultural district, and then have regulation for growing it in the other areas, like indoor growing, and that's just my comment.
Okay. Commissioner Wiggins?
Commissioner Wiggins for the record. Going back to the chart that Lee had there, I think this could be solved kind of on a case-by-case basis, and a special use permit for hemp should be looked at. Because some of these areas, you're going to have some people come to the meeting and say, hell no, and I think we'll take that into account. And in other cases, like where I've been to some of these areas and been bit by mosquitoes constantly, I'd prefer a hemp farm. So I would just recommend that we go the special use permit route, similar to the marijuana. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman? So,
Mr. Perry?
yes, thank you. I'd have one question. Were we basically, or the department, planning directed to come up with regulations by the Board of Supervisors?
Yeah, just to back up a little bit, to give some background, the issue did come up as a result of the farm that was potentially proposed on city property. It's sort of related to this, but not directly, because that was on public property, not on agricultural property, so that has a whole different set of issues. But it brought up the point of hemp being permitted by right, and these could be in the vicinity. So the Board of Supervisors directed us to start the moratorium in order to give us time to consider and adopt appropriate regulations.
Okay.
So without deciding what those regulations would be, it's just a hold for us to consider and come back with recommendations for regulations.
So we have a task.
Yep.
In that. Okay, I wanted to understand that. So, I mean, in my work in Nevada and 7 years working for the state engineer, I've seen, there's hemp growing in various places in Nevada now. Up in Nevada, there's fields of it that, basically replaced alfalfa pivots in 160-acre blocks that are flood irrigated, but it's a very rural area. I had to stop myself when I saw it because I thought, oh, I think I know what that is, and I'd never seen it before. There's just a couple of things that I think in any kind of regulation that I think we need to look at, and I'll explore the first one here because you mentioned it. You said hemp requires 20 to 30 inches of water. So I'm going to average that to 24 inches, 2 feet. Alfalfa's 4 feet. So if somebody plants, and looking at these things, 160 acres of hemp, that's 320 acre feet of water. And in no way would I ever want to see that come out of the city's water supply. Are what we talking about here ag surface rights that somebody has? Because, 320 acre feet is almost 2% of our permitted water right for the city. It's a big number.
So you either have to have surface water rights or municipal water is fair game because you pay for that essentially. So that would be up for grabs.
And in our growth management plan that we just updated, we said that we are going to not consider any industrial applications above, I forgot what the number was, some 1,000 gallons per day.
15,000 average.
Yeah, which isn't a big number. This is, if all of these areas fill in with this is a lot of water. And this is going to give away our ability to grow the city. So I would be for something that said here, hemp can only be grown with surface water and not municipal water from the city, from the city. I don't know if we can do that, but that makes a lot of sense to me to do that.
So I think this is probably a question for Lindsay. I would assume that acreage is what's used outside in that type of product. I would say that the indoor growers where they're recycling, and I don't know if it's hydroponic, and I would assume that in a more of a closed loop system, they're using much less on indoor grows, but maybe you know more about that.
Yeah, the 20 to 30 example that I gave is for outdoor grows specifically. So Lee's correct that in an indoor controlled facility, you would have better water efficiency, but I can't speak to what that is.
And I understand that. I highly doubt, thinking of what I've seen in Nevada for hemp growth, which is all outdoors, that there's any money in growing hemp indoors. I can't, maybe I'm wrong there on my economics, but what I saw was pivot-sized hemp fields that are outside that were being irrigated with underground water rights from in these agricultural areas out there. And I'm assuming that there aren't any non-city underground water rights that are owned by somebody around here that they could use for ag. Are there? Yeah. And that's ooh, that's scary to me because that's going to draw the groundwater level down. Okay,
Yeah,
that's one. I'd like to explore that to see no city water for it.
On the water side, I would, if they were using, like, for example, in the industrial area, if they were using more than the amount for growth management, they would need to come to the planning commission to get approval to use more water.
Okay.
So, and that's reviewed by engineering, who's not here anymore, but that, with each application, when they go into a building, they're reviewing the water usage because they need to know, they want to know how much is being used and how much is going into the wastewater treatment facility. And if it's over that threshold, that's going to trigger your review. So I would assume then that because we haven't seen those, that the marijuana grow facilities that we have that are indoors do not exceed that amount of water.
That 15,000.
Yeah,
And that's, as I recall, I think I might remember, it's like 12 to 15 acre feet a year or something like that. That's not a huge number. But that was my first comment here. The other is knowing the people in ag, and as they went through this, they're the only testing lab that can test for THCs in the state, and they've been charged with that. And, you know, they're the ones that are the arbiter of, is this over 0.3? And I don't know how often that happens, but just know that we're reliant. And I don't think we, the commission, or Carson City wants to get into, staffing a THC lab within the city, because I can guarantee you the Department of Agriculture didn't want to do it when they were charged with it by the legislature several years ago. But, we're going to be reliant on a state agency to determine whether or not these fields are in compliance. And if they're not, by a state agency that is going to have to administer the mitigation if they're not. I just, that one makes me a little uneasy, but I guess it is what it is, because they're the ones with the regulations that allow for hemp growing. Just a comment of, what if one of these fields comes in at 0.4, and then it's, oh my God, we got to go out there and harvest 160 acres of hemp, put it in a big pile, and burn it.
And to add to that, the Department of Ag has had several of those instances, and it seems to be increasing, that they're just seeing more and more not passing. And it's not that they're exceeding it by a great amount, but like you say, it's that 0.4 or anything in that range gets sticky for them, and technically they need to destroy it at that point. And it's the landowner's responsibility to actually do the physical destroying. But as I mentioned, NDA staff have to be on site to observe that. And to speak to their lab, they have one lab that the NDA is working with, and given the level of applications that they're seeing, they're quite busy.
And if I remember from the state presentation, when they were talking about, I think they have a little bit of leeway in the testing, very small amount. But if it's just a little bit over like that crop gets destroyed. And I also wanted to point out, from asking the marijuana people side, what is, just to compare, it's 0.3%. Is that's the cutoff? The marijuana growers are targeting 20%, just to put that in context of what it is. So it's not, they're just a little bit more. They're shooting for a lot more in their product that they're growing.
The third thing that I would just throw out here, because I do think that, when people see these, that you're going to have young people and so forth going out and saying, oh, wow, look at that, because of that we may want to require fencing and no trespassing signs around the whole area for access control. Thanks.
Any other comments? The last thing I see, Lee, is in the zoning areas, the limited industrial and the air industrial park. Those are areas that are not approved for marijuana growth. I would think that we would not approve them for hemp growth either. If somebody wanted to, I think if somebody wants to grow hemp inside, they need to go to the same areas that we have the marijuana growth in, instead of kind of spreading it out. So, all right, you got enough?
Yeah, we'll have to obviously didn't come away with a consensus. I mean, I think it's a lot and it's a good discussion. So what I'll have to do is come back to you with some options, maybe some sort of menu to make some recommendations to the board on how the regulation should be. But good discussion. I think I know the options on the menu now that I need to come back with. So yeah, I appreciate the discussion.
Okay. Item F. Thank you very much. That was informative. Mr. Plummer?
Sure, let me just first update you on some prior planning commission items that went to the board in June. We had the Silver Oak PUD amendments that were approved, and the Butteye Way rezoning from public to multifamily for the affordable housing project was approved also. Also in June, the Tahoe Western Asphalt appeal went to the Board of Supervisors. So Hope will correct me if I get their results wrong, because there was a few things, but they upheld the Planning Commission's removal of the condition that allowed operation after hours. So they are not allowed to operate outside of the hours, and the condition said they could 30 days a year operate outside the normal hours of operation, so that they upheld that. And I believe they retained the odor for the condition regarding no odors off-site for now, but put a stay on our enforcement of that until they need to go back with a report to the Board of Supervisors in August, because that ties with a new permit that they're supposed to get with NDEP that's supposed to have new equipment that's supposed to maybe take care of some of that. So through August and/or the annual review that's scheduled in October, that will continue to be, we're continuing to monitor and report when the odors, so we're still doing that odors are being detected and taking the complaints and still reporting it. We're just not taking enforcement action against it in the meantime, at the direction of the board, pending their new permit with NDEP. Is that a pretty accurate summary, Hope, Jen? Overview? Okay, so that's TWA.
Can we say if it's gotten worse or better?
Neither. We're still getting complaints. It depends on which way the wind blows. They're still operating with the same equipment last week and this week as they were before, so it's still the same issues. The other project was the zoning map amendment on Silver Sage and Clearview. And that was continued. They had a lot of discussion, and there was some discussion with the neighbors about what the zoning should be on the buffer between that property and the single-family 1 acres. We had some of that discussion there. We noted that's kind of the buffer. You can deal with that at the subdivision, but they were directed to go back and work with the applicant and come up with a plan that shows a buffer. They were hesitant to just randomly establish a line of where the buffer would be. So staff is going back to work with the applicant to bring that back to the Board of Supervisors. That was the direction on that. And then for the next meeting in July, we didn't get any new applications, but we'll bring back the hemp ordinance for your consideration. I think we actually are going to get a special use permit for another well house on Winnie Lane. And we have a workshop scheduled after that. Oh, no, yeah. So that's next month's regular planning commission meeting. Next week, the last thing I want to talk about, next Tuesday, we have the workshop, and your packets have been handed out on development standards. The municipal code chapter 1803 definitions and 1804, which is uses. So any public that wants to look at that, look at the Planning Commission packet. I will admit up front that I thought I was more advanced in what I had ready for you, and then when I got into it, it took longer. It was more tedious to go through than I imagined to try to match up all the retail and uses that were duplicate. And so, and plus this, 1803 and 1804 are really bulky, and there's no public here. So my suggestion is that it's probably going to take a couple meetings to get through it. And I may even include some late material to get some focus on some other issues in there. But a big part, if you could focus on the uses for now, and I think the definitions are going to evolve as we go through all the chapters. The definitions are evolving as we don't need to identify an art supply store versus any other retail store, and we can delete art supply store. So I think that'll continue to happen, things like that. But if you could focus on those and what we consider retail versus calling it something else because maybe it doesn't belong where other retail uses are and things like that. Focus on that. And again, I may have some other late information for you to try to focus your review on certain items, but we'll see you next Tuesday. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any comments on commissioners' reports or comments? Mr. Eswine? Okay. Lee, the only thing I have is, and I talked to you about it earlier, can we get at our next meeting or at the workshop or somewhere an update on that other pump house? Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Are there any other comments out there?
There's no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. In that case, can I have a motion to adjourn? We're adjourned. Thank you.